we're going to do is we're going to look at Chapter 1, Section 7. Primarily what we're going to look at is the perimeter, circumference, and area of different figures. So first of all, the perimeter of a polygon. Remember, polygon has straight sides, they're closed figures, and so they're going to look a little bit different than, say, a circle. A circle has nothing straight about it. It has circular sides. So first of all, if we're going to find the perimeter of the polygon, what we're going to do is we're going to add together all the sides. Okay, so we're going to add together all the sides. If you take a close look at the word perimeter, there's the word rim. So think of it kind of like a basketball hoop. It's the outside, it's the rim, it's all the way around. It's kind of like a fence. So if I take a look at the first figure, you're going to notice that it looks like a square, possibly a rectangle. Okay, and so what we can do is we can say that this side is 4 and this side is 4. So if we're going to find the perimeter is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, or the perimeter is 16 inches. Now, one person would say, well, Mrs. Medvik, can't we do 4 times 4? You technically can. However, the problem with that is students tend to get confused between perimeter and area. And so generally when I do perimeter, I add. Is it wrong if you do 4 times 4? No, it's not. That would not be wrong at all in this. However, I stick usually to addition when I'm doing perimeter. If I go to the next figure, you're going to notice that this is a triangle. So again, I'm going to take the perimeter equals 4 plus 7 plus 6, and that would give me 17 centimeters. Okay, notice that I just added them. Also notice that I put a label on it. The last one is a regular, and this would be a hexagon because there's 6 sides. So the perimeter on this would be P equals, and again, I do add 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. And so the perimeter is 30, and it would be feet. Notice it's just feet. It's not feet squared. It's just feet because it's perimeter. Now, let's just briefly look at the word regular again. Again, regular polygon, what that would mean is that all the sides are the same length. It also means that all the angles are the same measure. So just kind of a heads up, again, what regular means. All right, let's move on to circles. Now, circles are different. The perimeter of a circle is really called the circumference. And there's 2 formulas that we use when we do this. One of the formulas, C equals pi d, where d is the diameter. And when I look at the diameter on a circle, what that means is it is one side of the circle to the other side of the circle. Whoops, let's make that a little bit smaller. One side of the circle to the other side of the circle, and you go through the center. Okay, that would be the diameter, that whole piece. When we're taking a look at the other formula is 2 pi r. And the r, what that stands for is that stands for radius. And if I'm taking a look at the radius, I've got my circle, I've got my center. The radius is from the center out to the side. So this is r, and this whole thing is d. Now, when we try to find the circumference of a circle, let's first take a look at the first circle. Notice that it's giving me the radius because I'm going from the center out to the outside of the circle. So the formula that I'm going to pick up on this particular one is C equals 2 pi r. Again, when you solve these, you should have at least 3 lines of work. You need the formula, you plug the information in, and then you come up with your final answer. So C equals 2 pi, and the radius is 3. The circumference is 6 pi pi. Or if you wanted to, you could bring your calculator. And again, you can either use the pi key or 3.14. Kind of depends on the directions. For our purposes for right now, let's use the pi key. You're going to notice it's on the left-hand side, and it looks very similar to the pi symbol that I have on your paper. So I take 6 pi, and that gives me the circumference of 18.8, and that would be units, because I don't have centimeters or inches or whatever. Now let's take a look at the next one. You're going to notice that this one is the diameter. Why? Because it goes all the way across that circle. So we're going to go ahead and go C equals pi d. C equals pi 13. Okay, we could write it, actually it's better to write it 13 pi. So I mean, if you wanted to skip this middle step, that would be fine and go right to pi 13. But let's go ahead and use our pi key. 13 pi equals, I have 40.8, and it would be units. Again, notice that I have 3 lines of work. Here's the first line with the formula, the second one with the information in it, and the third with the final answer. So you must have 3 lines of work when you're working these. If you do not, you will not get the full credit that you want. All right, let's keep going. Areas of squares and rectangles. Areas of squares and rectangles are base times height. And so if you see it a lot of times, you'll have area equals BH. That's the formula that you're going to see. For the area of a triangle, it is 1/2 base times height. So you will see area equals 1/2 BH. And the area of a circle, A equals pi r squared. So if you're kind of wondering what this means and this means over on the side, I did it in more of a formula form. So let's take a look at the following figures, and notice it says to round to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to take a look at the first problem. Okay, notice that this would be considered a square or a rectangle. Okay, it looks more like a square because of the double hash marks. So that would mean this is 3, and this is 3. And they want me to find the area. So the first thing I do, I pick out my formula. Area equals base times height. Area equals, my base would be 3 times my height, which is 3. Notice I'm using parentheses. I'm not going to use a dot because that can be confused as a decimal. And I'm not going to use an X because that can be confused as a variable. So notice that I'm using my parentheses. And my final answer, A equals, would be 9 centimeters. And then you're going to have a little 2 up above it. Notice that it's small. That means that it's squared. And its area. Let's go to the next figure. The next figure you're going to notice is a triangle. So I'm going to grab the formula, area equals 1/2 base times height. Now, when we figure out base times height, and what side am I talking about, notice that there are 3 sides, right? Students get confused a lot of times, which sides do I choose? Well, when I look at a right triangle, I'm going to take a look at that little right part right here, and I'm going to take a look at what is what. Well, I know that this would be considered the base, okay, because it's sitting on the base, and this would be considered the height because they hug that right angle. Notice that 13 is kind of hanging out there. That's called the hypotenuse, and that we don't use. So a lot of times they give you information that you don't need. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab area equals 1/2. My base is 12, and my height is 5. Notice that again, I'm using those parentheses. Area equals, I can plug in my calculator, and I end up with 30. So it's 30, and it's going to be feet with a little 2, meaning that I'm dealing with area. The final one that I'm going to, or I shouldn't say the final one, the third one that I'm going to deal with, notice that it's a circle, so C equals, and notice they gave me the diameter, so I'm going to pick pi d, so C equals pi times 9. Okay, so I can write it as 9 pi. Sometimes you'll see it like that, and it's inches squared. That's considered like the exact. Or I could also go 9, and rather than the pi key, why don't we use 3.14? So I'm going to switch it up a bit. Sometimes they tell you 3.14, sometimes they tell you to use pi. Kind of depends on the directions. On a test or a quiz, I always give you that information. So that is not something you would be guessing about. So I'm going to take 9 times, and again, I'm going to use 3.14, and I've got 28.3 inches squared. Okay, and that actually does even better because you're going to notice it says to the nearest tenth. And finally, let's go ahead and take a look at this figure. Area equals 1/2 base times height. Again, I'm dealing with a triangle. Now, with this triangle, it's a little bit different than the last one because they did not give me a right angle. So it's like, okay, I don't know which side to choose. I don't know what measures to choose. I've got 4 of them. So the rule of thumb on this type of thing is when you have a line that comes down like this and it's dotted, that is considered the height. And when it comes down like that, it forms a right angle. So the bottom of this that touches that right angle and the dotted line that touches that right little square, that's my base and my height. Okay, so area equals 1/2. My base would be considered 1/6. My height would be 4.1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my calculator. And I end up with 12.3 centimeters squared. Notice how all my labels have that squared on it. Notice that I have 3 lines of work and it's picking out the right numbers. Really, really important that you're checking your answers as you go because then you know for sure if you did the problem right or not. All right, the final slide, we're going to take a look more at word problems. Now, these are the types of problems that you see on an ACT. You will see them also on our test. The first one talks about the perimeter. Now, that's really important because if I talk about the perimeter, I'm talking around the distance around the outside. It says that it's a regular pentagon. Here's another piece of information. Because it's a regular pentagon, regular, all the sides are the same length. Pentagon, it's a 5-sided figure. So now I'm taking some of the things that I learned from the first day that we started this chapter and I'm going to apply it. They want to know what is the length of one side. So if you want to, you could draw a picture of a pentagon. You do not need to, but sometimes it helps. It's regular, so all the sides are the same. And it's saying that it gives you the perimeter. Okay, it's going to give you the perimeter. So notice that a side is X. So what you can do, and I just gave it X. You could give it S, you could give it T, whatever you want. So the perimeter of this thing is going to be X plus X plus X plus X plus X. Notice that it's 5 sides. I'm going to take out P and I'm going to put in 35 because that's what they told me it was. And then notice that I have 5 X's, so I can go 5X. I can bring them together and combine like terms. Now I need to solve for X. Because the 5 and the X have multiplication that bring them together, I'm going to divide. So X ends up giving me 7, and it would be 7 centimeters because I'm looking at the side length. All right, let's take a look at the next one. It says the perimeter of a rectangle. So let's take a look at a rectangle. Here's my rectangle, right? I know that this side is congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to this side. It says the perimeter of it is 20 inches. So the perimeter of this whole thing is 20 inches. And it says one side is 8 inches long. Now, I don't know which side is 8 inches long. So I'm just going to pull out of the blue. I'm going to say that this is 8 and this is 8. It doesn't really matter. All I know that is if one side is 8, the other side is also 8. Because remember, the opposite sides are congruent. And then I don't know, I'm going to call this X and I'm going to call this X. So the perimeter of the figure is X plus 8 plus 8. And I know the perimeter is 20. So 20 equals, it's 2X plus 16. So I'm going to combine my like terms. I'm going to subtract my 16. F equals 2x. Divide by 2, x gives me 2. So it'd be 2 inches. Again, notice I'm using algebra. I'm not using a bunch of chicken scratch. I'm not doing a few things here and a few things there. I'm creating an algebraic equation, and I'm using that to help us solve those problems. And this is how I expect you to do these problems on the test if you want to have a 4. Okay. The last one, I'm finding the area of a triangle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a right triangle. Okay. And it says that the area is 36. The base, it says, so here's my right angle. My base on this, because I drew it that way, is 6 centimeters. And they want to know how tall the height is. And again, I'm looking at the area. So the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. The area, they say, is 36 centimeters squared. The centimeter squared tells me that that's my area. So I'm going to plug in my 36. I'm going to use this like a recipe. 1/2, my base is 6, and my height, I don't know what it is. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of combine my like terms and make things as simple as possible. So I'm going to make 36 equals 1/2 times 6 is 3, so it's 3h. I'm going to bring those together first. Now I can divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. H gives me, and it's 12 centimeters. It's not centimeters squared because that is the height. Okay, so this is just a general idea of how to do these problems. If you have questions, please feel free to come in and talk to me or email me. Let me know how you're doing.